The first element of narration that we're going to talk briefly about is the element of illusion. And I do always have to stress when we go into this one, because it sounds like illusion that starts with the letter I. It's not the illusion that something looks like something that it isn't, all right? It's not that kind of illusion. When we say that we allude to something, we really mean that it's a reference to something else. And this is traditionally, because I've been doing this for a couple of years, this is a tough one for most students, because I think in order to properly do this, you kind of have to look back from when Poe wrote this. What is his allusions to in this story? So technically, that's generally what you would do with this skill. I'm going to give my students a little more wiggle room, and I have no idea what Professor Conforti is going to come out with. I never do. So I'm going to start with my own. So what I did is, instead of trying to look at something historically, you could certainly look at things like the Bible. There's a lot of common themes in all of Poe's writing that goes back to many of the traditional human themes that you find in the Bible. But I think to make it more real to my students is I actually prefer to look forward. So instead of looking at the allusions that Poe's making, I'd rather look ahead at maybe some of the allusions that other people make looking back on a work such as this. So I would say anybody who's ever watched the television show The Twilight Zone, or anybody who's ever read anything by O. Henry, the idea of the unexpected twist at the end of the story, where you think it's going to go someplace and it kind of goes somewhere a little bit different or unexpected. If anybody's seen the movie The Sixth Sense, where they've got that unexpected ending, some people may argue that it touches on a different element of narrative, but I'm really just framing this to things that students may know. So there are television shows that'll harken back to the idea of the creepy old mansion, and even how many stories have we read, Hansel and Gretel, or other similar stories that have taken some kind of a physical deformity and used that as a way of epitomizing someone's character, right? The witch with the crooked nose or with the warts on it or something, right? So Poe is very much in that genre of using the physical to assign character traits to characters. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get too busy with it. But illusion, again, just so students know what it is that I'm comparing, it's really just the idea of comparing Poe's story to some other stories that have been written. And I'm going to give my students extreme license with this one, simply so they have a way into it, because it's difficult to look back from Poe if you really haven't read much about Poe or even know historically about the era. So I'm going to allow them to look ahead and see if there are stories that are more current, films or books or even television shows, that they may be able to draw those allusions to. Having said that, Chris, I'm a Professor Conforti. I can call you Chris because
Yes,
Charles is
Chris,
our
please.
friends. So yeah. So what did you come up with? What is it that you have as far as an allusion?
I use the traditional way that it's used. So I made an allusion to a previous reference, and actually out of the realm of Poe, but in Shakespeare. And I
Okay.
used exact wording, and it struck me very hard when I read it. And actually not the first time I read it, because I read Poe, sometimes I reread and reread and reread, and I keep extracting information. And that's the most very intriguing thing about Poe. How do I miss this? I go, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? So you have to forgive me when I'm looking the other way, because I'm going to extract actual paraphrased quotes from The Telltale Heart. But he used an allusion to Shakespeare, and the actual quote is from Shakespeare, "Out, you damn spot." And that was a particular scene involving both symbolism and foreshadowing in Shakespeare. The play was called Macbeth, and it was Lady Macbeth washing her hands, trying to get the imaginary blood off her hands as she recalls orchestrating the murder of Duncan. And this directly correlates, which I'm sure you've heard the expression, blood on one's hands, that they're guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. And Poe used, his words were, "The narrator's ray of light from the lantern that beamed, quote, precisely upon the damned spot.
Huh?
So I find that really, I don't think that was on accident. I think that was on purpose. Who
Mhm.
knows? But there's definitely a correlation, because when you understand what the I means, which I'm not going to get into it because we'll probably explore it further, and I want to leave a little bit interest, there is certain correlations with symbolism and foreshadowing.
Excellent.
So yeah, it was very clever, I thought.
Chris, I do have a question. What story do you use by Poe in your own class?
The Black Cat.
The Black Cat. Are there any obvious allusions between the Black Cat and the Telltale Heart that jump out at you?
Allusions, yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's, I mean, the yes, where here, and again, I don't want to do like spoiler alert. I think the I is the evil entity, and in that one, the cat is the evil entity. There are multiple evil entities. There are internal evil entities. There's, but there, if you want to talk about an object that's not, it's a living creature, but it poses as a different entity. So, and this is what I'm saying, we're getting into more
Yes.
personification.
Hmm.
And so a little spoiler alert, and that's not what I chose, but he is personifying the cat, and he's personifying the I. And that's where there's a correlation there, I'd say, the illusion.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to our next element of narrative.